Welcome back, viewers of the Indian Express. I'm Flora Swai, and we are still continuing with our budget updates and analysis on the official YouTube channel of the Indian Express. Joining me right now are Harish Damodaran and Ishan Bakshi, our senior journalists from the Indian Express. Ishan and Harish, first thoughts about the budget announcement, starting with you, Ishan.
So I think some of the key points that come up immediately are that she's stuck to the fiscal consolidation roadmap.
Right.
She's brought down the deficit to below 4.9%, 4.8 to be precise. And for next year, she's targeting also a lower deficit. There were some calls by some economists saying that you can relax and not go for such a deep consolidation this year. You can spend more. But the finance minister has chosen to stick to that. So the bond markets will be happy. And obviously everybody's talking about the tax cut for the middle class that she's announced. I think Harish can go into that.
Right. Harish, on the tax cuts.
Yeah, I think taking on from what Ishan said, actually this is quite a conservative budget, and as he said, I think the finance minister has not taken you can call it the easy way of providing a fiscal stimulus kind of a thing. Rather, she has stuck to the fiscal glide path, reducing the fiscal deficit. Our fiscal deficit had gone up to about something like 9%, during the peak of the COVID.
Right.
And now we are talking that in the next year it will be about 4.4%.
Correct.
So that's a very substantial correction when you look at it. So actually, it's a conservative budget, but it has been packaged very well, with this whole thing about nil income tax till 12
lakhs per annum. Yeah.
So in that way, it has been packaged very well. Whereas I would say that this is quite a conservative budget. And probably now with the deficit lower, now probably I think now the time is for the RBI to now kind of cut interest rates, because now the RBI can infuse more liquidity, they can infuse more liquidity and also cut the interest rate, because now there is no fiscal stimulus. In fact, there is actually a de-stimulus,
right, right,
effectively. So if you look at it, I mean, in terms of taxpayer money being spent on the public, it's not much, right? I mean, so I think they are looking entirely at some kind of a monetary stimulus and plus some kind of a feel good factor. Definitely, I think the tax cut is definitely a feel good factor, especially before the Delhi election. So I think it is well timed for that. So, but to what extent it will spur consumption, probably I think Ishan may be
one more point I wanted to make was that alongside the budget, she's also released a medium-term roadmap.
Yeah.
And it's for the next 5 years, if I remember correctly. And it's we've had this sort of discussion over the last few years about the center bringing down its debt.
Yeah.
It had shot up during the pandemic, and they've sort of projected. There are various scenarios and various growth rates and various assumptions. But they've sort of projected that they'll bring it down to about 50%, plus minus 1% over the next 5 years, I think by 2031. So at least there is a framework, there's a roadmap, and the fiscal deficit will be targeted accordingly, right, to bring down the debt to a sustainable level. And we can debate the roadmap, but at least there is a roadmap to go by now.
Correct.
So that's a positive step in that sense,
Absolutely. We'll talk about the sectors and all, but I want to ask, because last time in the 2024 election, it was more so that the budget sort of targeted Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. It had some goodies. And this time it seems like a very Bihar budget, so-called.
Yes.
Do you agree to that, or?
Yes. I mean, again, in terms of language, etc. Right? I mean, like for example, you have a Makhana board.
Yeah.
Now, how substantive it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have preferred a scheme for maize in Bihar.
Yeah.
I think Bihar farmers would have been better off if they were getting MSP on the maize. Because Bihar produces a lot of maize.
Right.
So so in terms of whatever optics, it's very nice, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like the tax cut, you know, probably more. It would have made more sense if we had reduced the GST rates, you know, because at the end of the day, we are still paying 18% premium on GST on health insurance premium, right? I mean, and most of the tax rates are very high, you know. I mean, on the products that we consume. Whereas I think here the focus was just on, you know, on taxpayers who are very small.
And I think it was to address the angst that has been sort of growing in the middle class, that, you know, the salary is not growing commensurate to expectations and in line with inflation, right? The real wage rate salary for the salaried class has not been that spectacular over the last few years. So, and also we've sort of seen, and various data seems to point towards that, not many more productive jobs are being created in those huge numbers that we need, right?
Yes.
So we need to grow the middle class, so not many jobs are being created. There anecdotal evidence is also available. So I think there was this angst that was the tax cuts were aimed to address also. But again, what Harish was saying, that the tax cuts are only directed at the direct tax paying population.
Correct.
Whereas the GST or the indirect taxes are paid by everyone, right?
Exactly.
To some way or manner.
Yeah.
So perhaps, I mean, going forward, I mean, there has been talk in the past about rationalizing the GST rate structure as well. So perhaps going forward, that's what will happen. I mean, one is hopeful, because on some of the products and services, they do seem to be at extremely high levels, you know.
And very irrational. Like I think we saw it, right? I mean, on popcorns, right? Caramelized, non-caramelized.
Exactly,
and So I would have preferred more action on the GST, you know, on the direct. But here, I think the priority was on whatever middle class anger management, you know, and that I think they have done it very successfully.
But then tell me if I'm wrong, but if they are sort of giving a rebate up until 12 lakhs, do you think this is the government's way of, you know, taking with one hand and giving with the other hand, that they are not reducing the GST? It's that is how they control the disposable income, maybe?
So I think the GST exercise is going on right now, and I think there will be some movement. When it happens, we don't know. But there has been, for a considerable amount of time, some concern about the GST multiplicity of slabs and the rates, right? There are about 4 or 5 rates. And every few years, we see some amount of tinkering with the rates, right? Some items, some goods will be taxed at a lower rate, some at a higher rate. So there's always this tinkering.
Yeah.
So I think the whole structure of the whole tax administration in the country should move towards fewer slabs and fewer rates. Make it simpler, right? And easy to comply with. I mean, you shouldn't have a system where buns are taxed at a different rate and buns and butters is taxed at a different rate. Or popcorns, what Harish was mentioning, right? Or 6 or 7 tax rates and 6 or 7 tax slabs. I mean, you should move towards, you know, less compliance, less and more simplified structure.
Like for example, you know, animal fat, you know, ghee is taxed at 12%, whereas vegetable oils is taxed at 5%.
Correct.
So there's absolutely no logic how they do it. So whereas I think in the income tax thing we have moved to some kind of like I think now she's saying that she's going to enact a new income tax act. I think there at least we have moved to something which is predictable, you know. Whereas I think today the main problem in the economy is the lack of jobs, you know, and because of and I think GST should have been the focus in this budget more than, you know, income tax, you know. That's my personal opinion, you know,
so,
because I think we pay much more taxes when we buy things, you know, than when we earn income, you know, and that affects everybody, right? I mean, at the end of it, I mean, how many people are getting benefited from today's move? You know, it won't be as much as if you had reduced 18% GST slab to say 15%, you know, 15% to 12%, 12% to, you know, that I think that should have been the movement.
So we don't see that there is any roadmap. You mentioned the roadmap, but does the roadmap mention anything or has a so-called plan when it comes to job creation or generating employment?
So the government has over the last few years taken a few steps towards promoting job creation. In the last budget, they had announced 2 or 3 schemes for internships, for jobs,
skill development.
Yes, exactly. And we don't see that much detail in this budget. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that there has to be a more greater emphasis on encouraging private sector investments, right, or on facilitating private sector investments. And this is an oddity of our current times, that private sector balance sheets are in a very healthy position. Bank balance sheets are in a very healthy position. The government has introduced even this PLI scheme, right,
Yes.
to encourage investments in the economy. But the investment rate that is needed for higher growth is not materializing, right?
Correct.
The economic survey that was released yesterday talked about an investment rate of 35%.
Correct.
We are at 31%. That's what
31%, yeah.
I mean, so it has to be met by private sector. Jobs will only come from the private sector. No matter how much you increase government spending cannot lead to that many jobs. It has to be the private sector.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is where more emphasis has to be for the government to put, yeah.
Given that you spoke about the private sector generating the employment, do you think that the private sector has to walk a tightrope when it comes to balancing employment generation at the same time its capital investment?
No, I think the two are linked, right? So what we have seen over the last several years is that there is a growing capital intensity of production, right? Even erstwhile labor-intensive sectors are becoming more capital-intensive.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that there is no scope for labor expansion, right? I mean, in sectors like textiles or garments, I mean, there is tremendous scope, as various countries have shown, right? Bangladesh next to us, and even in electronics like Vietnam. I mean, just a single Samsung factory can generate billions of dollars of exports.
Okay.
I mean, we are seeing some signs of that through Apple in South India. But obviously much more needs to be done, because the scale of the problem is much more, right? I mean, the scale of the Indian labor market is much more, right? I mean, you need to create millions more jobs, and you need to, I mean, Harish will be able to talk about it better, but you need to get the people out of agriculture and the people who are entering the labor force. You need to create jobs for both sectors, right? I mean, Harish will have better numbers on agriculture, but yeah.
Agriculture.
Well, you're asking me what what the budget has done for agriculture.
In terms of the fact that India is still majorly an agrarian economy.
Yeah, I think there's been more announcement effects. See, for example, like they've talked of, that they'll have a scheme for Atmanirbharta in pulses.
Yes.
The truth is, this year's, I think, our pulses imports, I think this year is going to be an all-time high. I think it will be about $5 billion, because there have been huge imports,
$5 billion is huge.
Yes. And whereas it had actually come down, about a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it only shows that, how vulnerable our pulses production is to the rainfall.
Correct.
So last year you had a bad monsoon, okay, and plus then you had the heat wave, etc. Right. So they have talked about now that again we will have an Atmanirbharta policy, but your import duty is zero in all pulses. Now why will and there is no MSP assurance in pulses.
Correct.
So why will farmers grow pulses? So farmers are very risk averse. So therefore, given a chance, they would prefer to grow same rice, sugarcane, the same usual this thing. So here again, now they have announced a scheme for pulses. We don't know. It is just like the Makhana board. We don't know what exactly it is going to achieve. And I think today and in today's budget they have also announced some kind of a scheme for I think 100 districts which are very backward in terms of agriculture, in terms of cropping intensity, irrigation, etc. So I think basically they were talking of because we had something called the aspirational district program, where they looked at very poor districts and then started looking at the social indicators. How do we improve say infant mortality rate, etc. Whereas I'm not sure whether this kind of a strategy can work in agriculture, because agriculture is ultimately an economic activity. It is not a social service kind of a thing. So what you see is too many schemes, and every year there is a new scheme which is announced, and then we forget what happened in the scheme last year, So like there was a scheme on top, tomatoes, onions, and potatoes about 5 years back. Now nobody talks about it,
Yeah.
So I think.
And this time it is oil seeds and
this
pulses.
time they are talking of oil seeds and pulses, but the fact is, both our edible oil and our pulses imports are going to be at a record this year.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of difference between talking and.
It says that the government will now launch a 6-year mission. Apparently, it is for Atmanirbharta in pulses with special focus on tur, dal, urad, and masoor.
Yes. So let's see, because now the tur is being it is now going to be harvested. Let's see whether farmers receive the minimum support price. So I think the government should walk the talk. On pulses, because otherwise, like this time, for example, in soybean, see, there's no point in talking about national mission on edible oils.
Yeah.
When soybean farmers in Maharashtra got hardly 4,200, 4,100 per quintal as against the MSP of 4,800, etc.
Correct.
So I think farmers, just like investors, they need they need certainty of policy. So if the government announces an MSP, they need to be confident that they will get the MSP. They're just like any other businessman, right? Today businesses are not investing because they don't see some kind of a rate of return on the investment. So there's no point in saying that you must invest. They have so somewhere it is missing. And
absolutely. I also want to talk about, like we said, that this will. There would be an increase in disposable income, obviously. How do you see this in direct tandem with food inflation?
So, any increase in income there'll be two components, right? How much households save and how much households consume, right?
Right.
Typically, households who are less well off tend to consume more, right? Higher income households will tend to save more because the propensity to save is much more the higher income households.
Yeah.
Lower income households will have more propensity to consume from whatever the increase in their income is. So to that extent, this would give a consumption boost. Now, one would be safe to assume that most of the individuals who file income tax would be among the more well-off sections of society, right? They would be the regular salaried people or the businessmen who have high income, right? So to that extent, you can see some increase in non-food spending. Greater share, I could assume, that will go towards non-food spending. Yeah.
Absolutely. We were talking about Bihar and we spoke about the Makhana board, but at the same time, there is a provision to expand the Patna airport. And in tandem to that, we have the Udan scheme where, new flights are being, flight routes are being launched and all of that. How do you see the aviation sector placed now?
So over the last several years, this government has, to its credit, pushed for development of new airports. We've seen a spectacular increase in the number of flyers, both international and domestic. Both took a hit during the COVID pandemic, but there's been a sharp recovery after that. Where I think both of us would agree is that we would like to see more competition in the airlines sector, right? That's because less competition sort of limits choices. So, but to its credit, the government has done quite a bit in terms of the infrastructure, right? It has there have been a lot of new airports that have come, a lot of new metros have also come in cities. So, the infrastructure, and especially in these sectors, has been a big priority in that sense, yeah.
Correct. I want to talk about cotton productivity. The Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman spoke about mission for cotton productivity. It's a 5-year mission and it has outlined significant improvements for cotton production, and of course she says that it will increase income of the farmers and also ensure a steady supply of quality cotton. Do you see that?
Okay, again, let's have a sober analysis. India is today producing less cotton than it did 10 years ago. Our cotton production, I think, peaked at about 39 million bales in 2013-14. And now we
10 years ago.
Yeah, and now we are barely doing 30 million bales. Our cotton production has actually come down. Okay, farmers are afraid of growing cotton because cotton has become more and more susceptible to pests. Whether it is a pink bollworm, whether it is whitefly, etc. And the government has not been allowing new technologies to come in. Including genetic modification. Okay. The last technology which we had was way back in 2008. When we had Bolgar 2. So I would say that if at all they are planning something on cotton, it has to include technology. We need to be open to technology. I think BT cotton made India more than self-reliant.
Correct.
It made India the second largest producer and the second largest exporter of cotton.
Yeah.
And from there we have now become an importer. So I would say that cotton has been a big failure of the last 10 years. So if at all I would look at this statement as some kind of a reflective thing. Hey man, we should do something about cotton. And farmers are running away from growing cotton. Because again the main problem is, one is the yields. The yields are very volatile. Prices are very volatile. Whereas at one time the yields seemed to be quite high, and whereas the truth is now that this crop has become very vulnerable to pests, and cotton is important not just for the fiber. The cottonseed oil is consumed. It's an edible oil, and after you extract the oil, the oil cake which you have, it is fed to the animals. So cotton is a very rare crop, which is a fiber crop. It is a feed crop, and it is a food crop. So definitely I think we should focus on cotton, just as pulses, oil seeds. We need all these things, but I think these crops are facing a crisis, and let's hope that the government and the various departments sit together and think on this. We need all the departments to think on this. Like cotton, it would be, say, textile ministry, it would be agriculture ministry, it would be the ICAR. It also would include the various private breeders, and even, say, the pesticide manufacturers. Whether are there any new molecules that we can introduce. So you need an integrated thinking, whether it is in cotton, whether it is in pulses, or whether it is in oil seeds.
Absolutely. You mentioned that in terms of cotton, the government has not encouraged genetic engineering so far, and we were also talking about.
It has. In fact, it was the government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee who first allowed BT cotton.
Okay.
Yes, it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee who actually brought in genetically modified cotton into India, BT cotton, and it produced a remarkable revolution in India.
Right.
But we have not had any new technologies in the last 10 years, which is very, very.
So,
very
in terms of not introducing any new technology in the last 10 years, and also skill development and job. Rise in job opportunities that we were talking about, they have declared a multi-sectoral rural prosperity and resilience program to be launched in partnership with the states, and they say that this will address employment in agriculture through skilling, investment, technology, and invigorating the rural economy per se. Do you think that this will be able to generate ample job opportunities in the rural sector?
Right now it's a statement of intent, the right intent. Nothing more. We have to see what this thing is. Ultimately, I would like to see more outlays for agricultural research, and a more modern kind of approach instead of very nativist, more kind of organic and this kind of thing. This year, I think there's not much emphasis on organic and this kind of natural farming, etc.
Correct.
So whereas I think we need to look at agriculture not as a social welfare thing, but as a business sector. And we should look at farmers as businessmen. And how do you increase their income?
Right.
That should be, I think, the approach. Generally in the economy, whether it is MSMEs, whether it is big corporates, whether it is farmers, whether it is anybody, all these are all economic agents ultimately. Right?
Absolutely. From agriculture in the rural areas to startups, Ishan, she declared a fund of funds per se, and they have been trying to facilitate ease of doing business for startups. How do you see this budget looking at startups?
So I I'm of the view that startups in India, especially in the tech space, don't need government funding. There's enough private capital out there. I don't think any startup company which has a great idea or a sound business plan will or has had any difficulty raising money in the past, right? We saw it in the mid 2020s. We've seen it with Flipkart before, and even in recent years, startups that have sort of built on the India stack, right? I mean, there have been so many startups, right?
Right.
In 2020, 21, 22, I think billions of dollars poured into startups, right?
Correct.
I mean, so the funding freeze sort of happened when the US Fed started to raise rates. I mean, so then there was a sort of a freeze and across markets, right?
Correct.
But I would be slightly hesitant if the government of India wants to get into startup funding, right? So that is my view.
Okay.
And I think the ecosystem is best served by private players.
Okay.
What the government can do is create a facilitating environment, right? I mean, and that goes beyond just startups. That's for every business, right? I mean, you improve the ease of doing business, bring down the cost of operations, the cost of operating environment, right? I mean, you bring all of that down.
Infrastructure.
Absolutely, and that goes beyond startups. That's for the entire economy. That's for all the companies. Yeah.
Absolutely. You think?
Yeah, like I don't think government should go into all this AI and all these things. It's better to leave it to the private sector. You know,
because ultimately market is the best allocator of capital, right? It is the best judge of risk. It is the best judge of talent. It is the best judge of profitability. I don't think
just ensure that investment comes in. You know, don't say I won't bring in this investment because it is China, because it is something. You know, don't bring in those kind of things. You know, whereas whether it is an AI or any new technology, you just allow it to come. You know, and it is better. And as the economic survey said, you know, let the government get out of the way. You know, and it should get out of the way in these kind of things. Government should focus more on education, on research. You know, on infrastructure. Irrigation, you know, those are the things which we need, where government money is required, not in whatever fund of funds for startups.
They have focused a little bit on education this time also with, the Center for Excellence, 5 centers for excellence. They are planning to expand the capacity in the IITs, and of course, I mean, they are again planning a center of excellence in AI. But education has been so-called important in this budget, or not so much?
I haven't really, frankly, taken a look at the proposals.
It's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it's up until this point. But like you said, education and healthcare are some of the aspects that the government should be focusing on.
I would like a lot of more money to go into agricultural universities, to the ICAR, because these are the places. And the return on investment is huge in agricultural research. You know?
Right.
Like any new variety which comes, any new this thing, you know, you spend, say, even if you spend, say, 1,000 crore, you know, the returns from it would probably run to lakhs of crores, you know. So I would like government to put more money into agricultural research, into basic research, rather than getting into places where anyway the private sector will come in, you know. So
absolutely. Ishan, you spoke about tariffs, and there's a new government in the United States with Trump 2.0. There are a lot of things. He's supposed to impose tariffs on Mexico and China and Canada today itself. So do you think that with this budget, how equipped are we to deal with the geo-economics of it all?
So I think this government's approach to trade is marked by both sort of fear and hope, right? There is the fear. I think that's why we stayed out of RCEP, the trade agreement. There's also hope. That's why we've got into bilateral agreements with UAE and Australia. But again, if you see the agreement with EU and with UK has been going on for years. I mean, it's not fructified so far, right? This government also sort of reversed years ago, not recently, but years ago, reversed the policy of reducing tariffs, right? I mean, the side raising tariffs. I mean, they were sort of perhaps to promote Atmanirbharta, make in India. That's the argument. So I think the government is yet to sort of formalize its own mind on what way to approach trade. And with Trump, obviously, there's a level of unpredictability and uncertainty that has entered into this whole environment. I mean, the path of most Asian economies, East Asian economies over the last decades has shown that the way to prosperity is exports. your manufacturing capacity is for the global market. Your domestic market is not enough, right? I mean, you look at all the economies, right, from Japan to South Korea to China. I mean, it is exports, right? I mean, and so there is sort of an export pessimism also that I seem to see, and this is when China has $1 trillion of trade surplus in 2024, and our share is very minuscule in the global market. So, I mean, our approach should be more to reduce tariffs, to enter into more trade pacts, to embrace, right, to be part of the value chains,
Right.
and to do whatever it is. And I think that is what will facilitate FDI. That is what will get more companies to invest in India. That is what will create more jobs. That's what will get domestic companies also to invest in India rather than go outside the country. So,
Right.
Yeah, I think there have been some very retrograde moves this time. You know, they've increased the customs duty on flat display panels.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, all are. Why should it be increased? I mean, I don't see any reason.
Yeah.
Just as I see no logic in having 40% import duty on solar modules. You know.
Yes.
So I think we need to keep tariffs low.
Right. We'll stick to that thought, Harish. But right now, the press conference has begun on how the budget 2025 looks. Let's take a look.